So we're starting our unit on area, and we're going to start with the easiest shapes and move to the hardest ones. So the easiest two shapes are rectangles and parallelograms, and we're starting with them together because they actually both have the same formula. And I'll explain that more in a minute, but if you remember, a rectangle is a four-sided figure. It has four right angles, so that's four 90-degree angles, and that's how you know it's a rectangle. Parallelogram also has four sides, but it doesn't have the four right angles. So parallelogram, you see the word parallel in there, and it means that it has two sets of parallel lines. So these two are parallel, and then these two are parallel. That is also true of this rectangle. These two are parallel, and these two are also parallel. So a rectangle actually is a parallelogram. It's just a specific type of parallelogram that has four right angles. And that's why they have the same formula, because they are the same shape, just different kinds. And so if we think about this rectangle, back when you were in elementary school, you learned that area equals length times width. Length times width, and you just multiply them together. We're still going to do the same thing, but in sixth grade, we call them something a little bit different. We call this the base. Think of base like the bottom, and then height is from the bottom to the top. So think about how tall you are from your head to your toes. Okay, so height up and down, base is on the bottom. And then for a parallelogram, base is going to be exactly the same. The difference on a parallelogram is that this right here is not the height. This is actually a side. Because if you were to think about going to the doctor and they're going to measure your height, they don't want you to stand crooked like this, okay? They tell you to stand up straight. So when you see a parallelogram problem, they're going to have usually a little dotted line drawn from top to bottom. Just remember that the height is always from the top to the bottom. So this right here is actually the height of the parallelogram. Sometimes they also draw it over here. Either way, it's the same, from the very top of the parallelogram to the very bottom of the parallelogram. So that's the base, that's the height, and then the side. Very important, don't use sides. They will give you those as extra information to see if you're paying attention, but that is not part of the formula. So whenever you take STAR, you're given your little formula chart, and you'll notice it says rectangle or parallelogram because, again, a rectangle is a parallelogram, so they have the same formula. Area equals base times height. Just like before when you did length times width, you're doing base times height. It's the same thing. There was no S in that formula because sides aren't part of the formula. So let's go ahead and write down what that formula is. And I'm going to write this nice and big. We just saw it on at the star chart. A equals BH, or B times H, because remember when those are next to each other, it means multiply. But let's write in parentheses for ourselves so that we remember this means base times height. Okay, and so let's look at an example of this. So example, they might tell you find the area, and then they're going to give you a parallelogram. Looks like this. Sometimes they could look a little bit different. They could be turned a different direction or something. And they've got this little dotted line here, and they're going to tell us that this over here is 6, let's say it's meters in this case. And then this one right here is 5.5 meters, and this down here is 9 meters. And they want you to find that area. So the first thing I always want you to do on an area problem is to write the formula. So Just write it down. A equals BH. If you want, you can draw the dot in the middle. Just remember it's multiplying. And then the base is right here, 9. The height is right here. Remember that this is a side. We don't want to use sides. So if I see a side in a problem like this, I just cross it out. So 9 times 5.5. That's not something I can do in my head, so I just come over here to the side. I have to put the 5.5 on top because it has more digits. 9 times 5 is 45, and then 9 times 5 again is 45, but I add 4 to it. That gives me 49. And then I have one decimal place, so I need another decimal place. So that tells me that the area of this parallelogram is 49.5, and then we need to label. So our unit was meters, but when you find the area of something, it's always in square units. So we use a little exponent of 2, because to the second power, you can also say squared. So our answer here is 49.5 square meters.